The Yend Mountains open their arms to embrace Eldarien as the golden sun sets behind them, sending shimmers of brilliant color across the sky and changing the lingering clouds from grey-white to purple, blue, and pink. She pushes Fenarion on until it is almost dark and the lingering light of dusk is dwindling, and then she pulls aside into a dense grove of trees. Here she sets up what little camp she can, a tent of leather pulled over 2 stakes of wood and a pole and a bedroll of hide and fur. After making sure that Fenarion is tied firmly to the nearest tree and gathering her meager belongings into the tent, she lies down and buries herself deep in the furs to keep warm against the quickly deepening chill. This is not the best place of rest at night, particularly for a woman, but Eldarien feels more or less secure, for the chances of someone happening upon her location in the darkness of the night are next to nothing. And so it is, as she wakes with the first light of morning just breaking over the land to the east and painting the sky a rose-white to complement the vivid hues of twilight the evening before. She rests for a while in the warmth of her sleeping roll, upon her knees, with her head against the earth, the traditional position of prayer for the worshippers of Ierendal, and then rises. The air is quite cold, and she finds herself shivering at the sudden change. After pulling her cloak tight about her, she packs up camp and feeds Fenarion a few morsels to supplement the grass.
Good boy, you have done well. Only one more day of this and we will be there. If all goes well, by this evening you will be feasting on all the hay you could desire.
With this, Eldarien unties the horse and climbs into the saddle, which is cold against her thighs. She looks up eagerly at the sky and hopes that the sun will soon warm the air and dispel this biting chill. But as the day wears on, and the mountainous trail rises ever higher among the rocks and cliffs, the air does not become warmer, but colder. She keeps herself warm as best she can, her breath and the breath of the horse rising as thick mist in the air, and the clouds themselves dense and low-hanging, garmenting the mountains before and above her like a cloak carelessly thrown over the shoulders. The trail winds tightly now against rough and steep crags of rock, dark stone with lighter veins of white or grey ore, switching back again after a few hundred yards or a quarter mile to traverse upwards in the opposite direction, all the while nearing a location at the base of 2 enormous peaks in which Eldarien knows her family lives. For a moment, she glances over her shoulder and sees the plains of Melrock spread out beneath her, enshrouded in a light mist, but still visible. The dim sunlight through the clouds illumines her sight, and she squints her eyes to see as far as possible. But the city of Ristfand is not visible, either too far away now, or too densely covered in the icy moisture hugging the face of the earth. Nonetheless, she brings it before her mind's eye and the people dwelling within it, in their daily occupations of work and play, and beyond the city, the great expanse of the sea. In contrast to this, she turns back and imagines what awaits her ahead, nothing more than a wide steppe in between mountains, with scattered homesteads hiding among the rocks, a dozen or so families who share a rugged life together, while each keeping their own plot of land. Here their sheep and cows graze together, and they share the fruit of the soil and of their labor with one another, as they have done for over a century. Soon the imagining turns to reality, as Fenarion carries Eldarien over the last rise and a flat stretch of land unfolds itself visibly before her, mysteriously beautiful in her earth-sheltered and sky-veiled serenity and stillness. Across the plain she rides now, her heart beginning to swell with the expectation of seeing her family again after 3 years. She knows the land well, and has no trouble finding her way to the 2 standing stones that mark the limit of her family's farmland. From here, She follows the rocky trough of a well-worn trail, weaving among the grass and the fields, to a wooden house and a stable standing not far from the base of a tall and stony cliff, down which trickles a small but visible stream, descending from rock to rock until coming to the narrow crevice that the water follows across the plains to the south, and, presumably, all the way until joining a larger river or the sea itself. Eldarien dismounts from the horse and leads him by the bridle to the stable, in which another horse is already kept. She gives him a few shovels full of hay, unties her pack from behind the saddle and throws it over her shoulder, and gives the horse some grateful caresses on the face and neck. Then she turns toward the house when she sees a figure approaching her from the same direction. It is her father, his time and weather-worn face glowing with a radiant smile and his arms open in a gesture of welcome.
Pa,
She exclaims without a thought and picks up her pace.
My dear Maria, welcome home.
it has been too long.
It has been as it must be.
Her father replies and grabs his daughter's shoulders and holds her at arm's length, as if to get a good look at her, before burying her in his embrace.
But it is good that you are here.
She simply rests in the experience of his large stature, enfolding her own smallness and his raspy breathing after too many bitter winters, with lungs that sound weak but are strong, and his stubble tickling her forehead. They stay like this for a long moment, until she speaks and says,
I am sorry I did not tell you that I was coming.
Why?
he replies, holding her out to look at her again.
So as to warn us as of impending danger. There is no need.
She smiles at this.
Ah, your mother will wish to see you.
Her father says with a grin.
I would love to see the look on her face when she beholds you, our own daughter, yet even more graceful and beautiful than before.
The encounter with her mother is even more beautifully awkward than that with her father. Such things do not matter with family, as Elmarien's mother, in the process of washing a large pot used for cooking stew, promptly drops it when she sees her daughter approaching, arm in arm with her husband. And if that was not enough, she drops it on her foot and cries out in pain as it rolls for a few feet across the kitchen floor, until stopped by Eldarien, who lifts it up and places it back on the worn wooden table that lines the wall.
Are you hurt?
Her daughter asks, rushing to her mother.
I am quite all right, yes.
The woman replies without a thought.
Oh, what am I saying? I am wonderful. But do forgive us for not making it to one of the greatest moments of your life.
I did not expect you to come.
Eldarien replies.
The road is long and treacherous, especially for someone your age. I would have resisted your coming had you tried.
Nonsense.
The woman says.
It was our daughter's own special moment.
But you did not come, and that was as it should be. I am here now, and that is more than enough.
Yes, well, I suppose that it is.
She smiles and then embraces her daughter just as her father had done.
Where are Rihia and Alric?
Eldarien asks.
Out behind the house.
Her mother replies.
Practicing with the bow, I think. Though they may be building another fort among the rocks as they are wont to do.
Always children they are.
Eldarien laughs.
You know Rihia is 15 now, right?
Her father asks.
Indeed, she is 10 years my junior.
Eldarien replies.
She must be growing into a fine young woman now.
She is, truly.
Her mother absent-mindedly unties her apron and hangs it on a peg on the wall.
And Alric?
He too is growing, but is still very much a boy.
Her father replies.
You know how it is, having you children so spaced out in years.
Her mother says.
Your elder siblings are so far beyond your age that if your father and I had not the gift of extraordinary longevity, we would not have lived to see you three grow, nor for that matter, be conceived.
They are not that much older than we.
Eldarien teases with a smile.
Yes, I suppose, but they are well into life now with families of their own. Those, that is, who survived beyond youth.
She adds at the end with downcast eyes. The subject visibly pains Elmarien's mother even now. Her parents had indeed lost 2 children, one at the age of 2 and another almost 10 years of age. If the spirits of the dead still live in the realm of Middle-est, then they are a large family indeed. 8 children full, though only 6 visible to the eyes. Elmarye indeed finds herself oft thinking of her lost siblings, one whom she had never met, being older than her and dying before she was born, and the other growing up right at her side, only a year younger than her, until she died tragically of illness in her 9th year. She talks to them at times from their dwelling place in the mysterious space to which the human heart goes after the gates of death open and close about it. Surely they must still survive in some fashion, though Elmarye does not know what manner this may be, nor do the teaching of Niraniel, nor of any of the other gods, seek to explain it beyond vague gestures and dim images. Elmarye's mother goes to the back door of the house and cries out in a bellowing voice,
In the name of the 7 divines, get in here. Your older sister has come home.
Mother,
Elmarye says quietly, as the woman turns back to her husband and daughter.
Yes?
please do not invoke the divinities lightly.
Ah, yes, sorry. It is out of habit only.
With this, she returns to the kitchen and begins to again clean the large pot which she soiled by dropping it on the floor.
You know,
Her father says,
that there are some who say that the divines do not even exist. There is no force in the heavens, they claim, except what our own wishes and desires have placed there.
Do not say such things, father.
Elmarye whispers with a veiled intensity in her voice.
I did not say I thought so,
He replies,
only that others have said so. Our neighbour, Olandis, for example.
He is a cynical old man, Telran.
her mother says, as she scrubs away at the edges of the pot.
Did you know that he used to be a warrior in his younger days? He travelled across the continent and even spent some time in Valyria, in Harran, the very seat of the Empire.
Is that so?
She asks.
Indeed.
He affirms, matter-of-factly, as if only one response is appropriate to this statement. His wife does not seem as impressed as her husband.
Perhaps what we worship
He begins, starting up on the earlier train of thought.
are only the faces of our own desires, projected into the heavens.
I thought you said that you didn't believe.
His wife sighs.
You were only saying that others said so.
Indeed, Girinda.
He mutters. Elmarye remains silent throughout this exchange.
Anyway, Elmarye,
Telran says, trying to change the subject.
your old friend Bilia is engaged to be wed. Can you believe it? She and Afadir ended up getting betrothed after all. The wedding is not far away. I don't remember the date exactly, so perhaps you will be able to attend it while you are here.
That would be wonderful.
Elmarye replies.
I would love to attend, and perhaps I can pay them a visit while I am here as well.
How long shall you be here after all?
Her mother asks.
It is not determined.
Elmarye says.
I expect to stay a long while, as long as I may.
Splendid, splendid.
Telran exclaims, clapping his hands together.
Perhaps we can have the young couple over for dinner and can congratulate them properly.
That would be fine indeed.
Elmarye says.
But speaking of dinner, how has the harvest been?
At this question, her parents' faces fall, though only for a moment, before they both hide it again.
Enough to keep us going another year.
Her father replies,
Much less than we would hope.
says her mother.
I see.
Elmarye whispers, as Telran looks at Ierendal in discomfort, as if to correct her loose mouth which had spoken too much.
Telran, what is there to hide?
She says, setting down the clean pot and lifting up another dish to wash.
Most of our crop did not survive, and we have been making do with the simplest and hardiest fare. And we even had to slaughter old Varka. He was too ancient to be any good as a beast of burden anyway. Not the best meat, very tough, but it should last us a good many months.
My dear,
Telran says quietly.
Oh, I am sorry.
She replies, stepping forward and placing a hand on her husband's shoulder.
I should have been more sensitive. I know that it was a tough choice for you.
one does not plough with an ox for over a decade without growing to love the animal.
He says quietly, the sadness showing in his face.
But let it go. We have both now spoken too openly and out of place. And our daughter is here, so let us rather listen to her and all that she has to share.
Please always speak openly with me.
Elmarie requests.
But yes, I will be happy to share as well.
After this, the back door bursts open, and her two younger siblings stumble into the small house, covered in mud and yet beaming from ear to ear.
Oh, what a mess.
Ierendal cries.
Out, out! Go clean up in the creek before you come in and track mud throughout the house.
Before turning to go, both of the young persons look at their big sister beaming and laughing. She is impressed by how much they have grown, particularly her sister, and yet also by how radiantly playful they remain, just as she has always remembered them. It seems the tough times have not succeeded in dampening their spirits, and in this Elmarie rejoices.
Why don't you have yourself a seat?
Ierendal says to Elmarie when they have gone, gesturing to one of the chairs around the dining table. Elmarie nods silently and does as suggested, the deep feelings unique to homecoming washing over her. Telmerion sits next to her, while Ierendal continues washing the last of the dishes, and then she sits as well.
So tell us,
Ierendal says at last,
of your life in Ristfand and of the celebration that you have so long awaited.
The daylight is fast fading from the sky when the conversation at last draws to its conclusion in sharing and listening from all parties in equal measure, and the family gathers for a meal before retiring for the night. Elmarie, however, feels no need for sleep. Indeed, her heart is restless, stirred to deep longing at the memory of the past, at the stories of her family, and at the hope and expectation of the future. After pulling her cloak tight around her body, she steps outside into the night and walks away from the house and the barn until the starry firmament is visible, unobstructed above her. The air is bitter cold, but there is no wind, and a deep stillness cradles the land and the air, and Elmarie gratefully drinks it in, listening to the subtle nocturnal sounds, an owl somewhere nearby, in one of the few trees of the steppe, or perhaps perched atop the gable of a roof, the stream softly trickling among rocks as it winds its way down towards the sea, and further off in the distance, perhaps even down in the plains, the howling of wolves. She feels within her a stirring of anxious expectation and allows the feeling to linger. What is the substance of this anxiety, and what is she expecting? Of course, it is most likely nothing but the natural fear that one feels before an uncertain future. Her life is no longer in her hands, and this thought awakens within her both a deep security and peace as well as a kind of trepidation. It is also true that, however glad she is to be back home with her family, she feels less at home than she had expected she would. Part of this is clearly because she has found another home, the home of her mature choice rather than the cradle of her youth. But another part, she realizes now, is that she has never felt entirely at home, even at home. As much as she loves the plains of Telonis and the families that live scattered among the fields and the farms, there has been a spark in her heart, a spark of restlessness drawing her elsewhere. This is true even of the warmth of her parents, of the joy of being with her siblings, and the safety that is so unique to the bosom of one's origins, the family of one's birth, rarely to be found so deeply elsewhere. But she has found it elsewhere, and in much greater measure. Indeed, the restless longing led her beyond the security that her parents and her home provided, and returning to them now stirs in her a tension which she did not expect. Elmarie relaxes upon the touch of this longing, which is sweet, even as it is marked by a certain bitterness or pain. As she walks under the canopy of stars, stars which she has seen and contemplated so many times, she also feels the stirring of memory, the nostalgia returning for the many times throughout her youth when she would walk under these same stars, across these same fields, and be gripped by the same longing. And in this way, the nostalgia ceases to be nostalgia but becomes fully present, like a line is drawn from then to now, or like they intersect in a single experience made alive at two different moments of life, or two different moments tapping into a reality that is always present, deeper than feeling, at every moment, even if only tapped into at certain times. As Elmaria reflects upon this feeling, she becomes aware of a trait of her life progressing unto this day, a trait which has gone almost entirely unnoticed by her until this moment: solitude. She has long been drawn to solitude, attracted to it. Yes, her life has been marked by it from the beginning, and after many years she has befriended the solitude like an intimate companion. Even in her family life and in the daily affairs of the homestead, she lived as if alone, as if no one could see her, and she lived before the gaze of deeper eyes, eyes that looked upon her in her solitude, where she remained veiled from the eyes of all. Realizing this, Elmaria recognizes that it is not the solitude itself that she has loved, but what lives in the solitude. Those eyes that gaze upon her when she is alone, those eyes from which nothing can be hidden or concealed. Perhaps this exposure is unwelcome to others, and they flee from it. For do not many people flee from solitude in fear? But for Elmaria it is secure and safe, and thus deeply desired. When she is alone, she feels least alone, for here she feels most deeply seen and most intimately understood. Yes, and this is what had led her to Ristfand, what had led her to her new home deeper than the home of her origin. For she recalls now a song she had learned in her youth, a song taught to her by an old woman who lived alone at the edge of the steppe, in a cottage looking out over the plains as they extended far below into the distance. Elmaria sings this song now in a soft voice, audible only to herself, and the solitude that envelops her.
She is the wind in the trees that whispers at night. She is the sweetness of dewdrops, glistening and falling, heard only by the heart that is still enough to listen, and humble enough to welcome their gentle calling. She is the warmth of the hearth burning while all sleep, and she is the awakening of one in the night, sleepless. She is the vigil of expectant longing that they keep, heart alive in aloneness, yearning for the coming of togetherness, for the coming of the dawn that dispels every night.